Hey guys, it's UFO Man. Due to an unexpected and very unfortunate situation on my channel, we've had to part ways with one of our panelists. I would like to wish him all the best of luck in his future endeavors. Tommy?
Yeah, folks, this was a very unfortunate situation. It's not something that we choose to talk about on social media, YouTube, anything like that. It was just something that we felt for the best, what was best for the channel, what was best for the viewers, and we decided to move on. So we intend to do that. If you have any specific questions about the situation, we will be happy to answer those. An email address will be provided below. So go ahead and shoot us a question if you have one. Other than that, we're going to go ahead and move on, keep doing the same thing we've always done, and give you great content and great interviews, things of that nature, and move on. Thank you.
Yes, we're just gonna proceed with what we normally do and provide you quality information and entertainment. So we hope that you will continue to join us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome everybody to a special edition of UFO Man Live. Tonight we are featuring a special guest, Terry Lovelace. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
I say Lovelace, but yeah.
Okay, Lovelace. Okay, Terry Lovelace. He has a very interesting story to tell about an abduction at Devil's Den State Park in Arkansas. But before we do that, let's go around the panel and introduce each other. My name is UFO Man, as you all know. Next to me is Tommy Highway. Take it away, Tommy.
Folks, I'm Tommy Highway. I'm an author, ufologist, network engineer. I've been involved in ufology for the last several years after experiences that I had in the mid-90s. I did grow up close to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio, which is, of course, rumored to be where the storage facility is to the Roswell wreckage, as well as some of the alien corpses that were found. Thank you.
Terry, introduce yourself.
Hi, good evening. My name is Terry Lovelace. I'm here tonight as UFO Man and Tommy's guest, and I'm happy to be here.
Thanks for coming, Terry.
Honor,
okay, sir. Tommy, take away the bio, please.
Fantastic. Folks, let me read a little bit about Terry. Terry Lovelace served on active duty in the United States Air Force from 1973 to 1979. Trained as a medic and an EMT, the bulk of his enlistment was spent as a first responder at the emergency room of Whiteman Air Force Base Hospital. After military service, he completed a bachelor's degree in psychology, cum laude, from Park University. He earned a Juris Doctor from Western Michigan and was admitted to the bar the same year. In addition to serving as a felony prosecutor, he was keenly interested in healthcare law. He is a member of the American College of Healthcare Executives and was certified as a healthcare risk manager. While an assistant attorney general for the U.S. territory of America Samoa, he was general counsel for LBJ, Tropical Medical Center. He finished his legal career as state's attorney for Vermont's Board of Medical Practice in 2012. He lives in Dallas with his wife of 45 years.
Thank you, Tommy. That was wonderful. I appreciate the very kind introduction.
Thank you, sir.
He also has a couple of books that he's written. He's an esteemed author, and he's written a couple of books about his experience. Here's the first one that he wrote, Incident at Devil's Den, a true story by Terry Lovelace, Esquire. Compelling proof of alien invasion, and I think it's available on Amazon, correct, Terry?
It is only on Amazon, yes.
Okay, and then he also wrote a follow-up book called Devil's Den, The Reckoning by Terry Lovelace, Esquire. This is also available on Amazon, correct?
Correct, or you can go to terrylovelace.com and look at the pictures, and there's a link there as well.
Okay, all righty. Terry, tell us a little bit about yourself, starting with how you entered into the military, how you made your choices of entering into the Air Force, and how the camping trip came about.
Sure. I graduated from high school in 1973 and decided to enlist in the United States Air Force. Not so much out of patriotic sense, but more as seeing it as a ticket to college. Way to pay for tuition. I served for 6 years on active duty honorably and did my best. Enjoyed my job, enjoyed the United States Air Force. And I drove an ambulance as a first responder. I was an EMT. And I worked the night shift from 11 o'clock p.m. to 8 o'clock a.m. I worked with a guy, Tobias, and the two of us were best of friends. You work with somebody on the night shift for 3 years, you get to know them pretty well. I was 22 years of age and he was 23 at the time. We were both newly married. We both lived on the base in NCO housing. So one night in 1977, I think it was April, my friend walked up to me and said, "Hey man, I got an idea. Let's go camping." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" I mean, I'm a city kid. I'm from St. Louis, Missouri. I knew he was from Flint, Michigan. I knew I'd never been camping before, and I really strongly suspected he'd never been camping before, and he hadn't. And I'm like, well, what's up with this? And he actually made a good point. He knew that I was an amateur photographer. I had a little dark room set up in my house and developed black and white prints. And I had a new camera. And unfortunately, when you live on a nuclear base, there's not a lot you can do with your camera. So I wanted to get out in the country and photograph wildlife. And my friend was an amateur astronomer. He wanted to become either a cosmologist, an astronomer, something related to space. And because that was his fixation. I mean, he could name all the constellations and he could time when a satellite was going to come over. And there weren't that many satellites around in 1977. So, and Devil's Den State Park, we didn't know it at the time, but it has a long, dark history. If we have time, I might go into some of that.
Okay.
But it's 6.5 hours south of Whiteman Air Force Base across the Arkansas border from Missouri. And in June of 1977, we prepared as well as we thought we could and made the trip down to Devil's Den State Park. And by agreement, we dodged the ranger station, and he had heard a rumor from a guy that had been to the park and who said that there's a high plateau kind of out, and gave us a north to the northwest of the campsites. That's it. And that's what we were looking for. And it's kind of misleading by that photo, because when we were there, the plateau, the forest around the plateau, the tops of the trees were level with the plateau. So unless you were right up on it, you couldn't see the thing. And just by happenstance, my friend was able to say, turn left here, turn right here, and navigated us right to it. And we were on pavement that degraded to gravel, that degraded to dirt, and we came to a chain across the road with this really sternly worded "Keep out, do not enter" sign. And my friend saw that the chain had just been looped and padlocked on itself and draped over a nail on the opposing post. So I was about to turn around. He's like, "No, man, I got this." He hops out of the car, picks up the chain and drops it to the ground. And it's like, woohoo, we're in, you know, we're feeling like Lewis and Clark, right? You know, we've never been camping before, but we're
Right.
we're real frontiersmen.
Roughing it.
Oh man. And we found our way to this plateau, and there's one dirt road still there today. It's just still a dirt road. And you know, there should be 40-year-old mature trees on top of that plateau by now, and there are not. I took the photographs of that from Google Earth and put them on my Facebook page, and I got a response from a follower who's a landscaper down in Alabama who said somebody cuts that. They keep that clear cut so that no trees will grow onto it.
Really?
Really. And that sliver of land is not actually in Devil's Den State Park. It's actually federal land. It's carved out of the park.
Wow.
We had no idea. So we were passing up federal land. It's owned by the Bureau of Land Management. I tracked the deed down, and it's owned to the Bureau of Land Management and leased to an individual. So for some reason, the U.S. government pays for gas for 50 years to cut, you know, to keep clear cut the top of this plateau in the middle of nowhere.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Right.
so go figure.
You almost wonder if it's a site that's known for what happened to you in the past.
You know, I don't like to make assumptions, but that's kind of the most obvious assumption to make. It really is. I can't imagine any other reason.
I would think
Right.
there had to be some special reason for them to be wasting resources on a piece of ground, like you said, in the middle of nowhere like that. That's very interesting.
Yeah, it makes no sense.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Right.
So when we got there, the grass was about 6 inches tall, about halfway up our lower leg, and it was covered with late blooming wildflowers, and it was just gorgeous. I mean, it was just like the perfect place to camp. So I wanted to set up camp in the middle of the thing, and my buddy's like, no, we can't do that. Let's set up over here by the tree line. And I didn't understand his resistance to that, but later on it made sense, because had we stayed where I wanted to camp, this thing would have been right over our heads. And what we saw, this was about, well, you know, we had a good day, a fun day, doing all the cool stuff you do when you go camping. It was all new to us, and
Right.
we enjoyed ourselves. It was fun. And we had the little $10 Kmart tent and some blow-up air mattresses. And about 9 o'clock that evening, we'd burned some hot dogs, and you know, we had our air mattresses inflated, one on either side of the campfire, and a little campfire between us and a tent in back of us. And we're just talking and chatting, and there came a lull in our conversation, and it got quiet. And I noticed that the tree frogs, the crickets, all the stuff in the forest that makes noise at night
Right.
fell silent. And it really was, I thought it was spooky. It unnerved me. It didn't faze my friend, but it unnerved me. If I'd have been there by myself, I'd have been gone.
Right.
But I wasn't going to do that. I was going to be that guy. So I tried to put it out of my mind, and we carried on talking. And it's about 10, 15 minutes later, he's got his head turned to his left, and he's looking at something. And I'm about to ask him, hey, what are you looking at? When he asked me, hey, Terry, were those lights there before? And I didn't know of any lights. I mean, this was the middle of nowhere. You know, if you look at the satellite images now, there are some houses and things somewhat close by, but when we were there was nothing out there. And and when he said, were those lights there before? I couldn't see them because his torso was in the way, so I had to stand up and take a step back. And on the western horizon, there was a set of 3 little stars in a tight triangular pattern sitting right above the horizon. And they were too far above the horizon to have been lights from a train or a parking lot or something. They were definitely in the sky. And I thought maybe it was a plane that was headed right toward us, and we really couldn't perceive any motion until it would change course by a degree or two maybe. And just look stationary. But I couldn't think of any airplane that would have that triangular shaped light configuration.
Yeah.
So we're both kind of just puzzled, and we're looking at this thing, and then it rotates. It turned like it was on an axis. The 3 stars turned, and they turned to the right, and rotated about 120 degrees and aligned the base of the triangle level with the horizon.
Wow.
Parallel with the horizon. And then as soon as it did that, it started to move up into the sky. Slowly at first, but it started to move up. As soon as it started to move up, that's when I felt this this wave of calm wash over me. It was like mild sedation. You know, what we were seeing, our emotions were muted. I mean, this, you know, we should have been scared or freaked out or even more curious than what we were. We were all almost kind of, I won't say apathetic, but almost disinterested. It really felt like I was an observer more than a participant. It was a weird emotion, but my friend must have been in the same frame of mind because, you know, there's no conversation between us. We're just watching this thing and we're absolutely relaxed. And we watched it and it climbed up into the sky. I think it hit a ceiling of about 10,000 feet. I'm guessing. I really had nothing to base that on other than my assumption. And when it hit 10,000 feet, it changed orientation to lying flat, parallel with the earth, and then dipped down and started a glide plane in toward us. I mean, we could tell by the apex of the triangle pointed directly at us that that's where it was headed. And as it's descending, it's getting larger, you know, and we could tell that it was a solid object because it would, as you go past the field of stars, they would blink out for a moment until it had passed. And it was crystal clear night with a trillion stars out, and the sky had kind of a dark blue glow to it. But the area inside this triangle was black. So we knew we were looking at a solid. It wasn't three objects moving in unison. It was one object. And as it slid down, it really was like gliding. We never heard a noise. It did this thing where it tumbled, and the point of the triangle dipped down, and then the back end came all the way around, and it did a complete somersault. And I don't know where this comes from, but I had the feeling that they were doing that for us, you know, that was their way of saying, look, this thing isn't out of control. We're in control of it. And I don't know where that feeling come from, but I had that feeling. And
Terry, would you like me to show a picture, your drawing of what it looked like?
Yeah, I think folks would like that.
Okay.
That drawing, that was made I drew that just a few months after the incident. And if you look at the ground, to the far left, you'll see some forest. And then you'll see my car, my 1966 Impala, and two figures and a tent. And I drew that to kind of give some kind of, sense of size to this thing, because it was absolutely huge. It filled that entire meadow. And It was, as I described, a city block on each leg of the triangle.
Wow.
So it was enormous.
And how many, you said it was like 5 stories high?
It was, but we couldn't tell that at this point. At this point, all we could see was the underside of the thing. And so it cruised in at about 5,000 feet on the horizon and then descended. As it came across the floor or the tops of the trees, we could see the points of light dimmed somewhat, but it's still illuminated. So we had 3 like dim points of light on the treetops, and then this black shadow in between the points of the triangle. And it glided in and stopped. And again, totally silent, stopped at about 3,000 feet over our heads. That's an estimate, but I think it's going to be pretty close, 3,000 feet. So as I said, we could see the underside of the thing, but that was it at this point.
Right.
And as soon as it stopped, from underneath and in the center, it shot down a beam of light that was a white light. It had the quality of a searchlight cutting through fog, where you see a column of white light.
Sure.
But there was no fog. There was just this maybe 6 inches in diameter column of white light that landed in our campfire, and it just, like someone hit a switch, it turned on, and it stayed in the campfire for about maybe a minute. And then just, again, shuts off. And then there came a second light, and this was a laser. And I'd never seen lasers except on television. And this was about the diameter of a pencil. And it was a bluish purple in color. And it would land in one spot in our campsite for like 1/10 of a second and then reappear in another spot. So in a second, it would dance around 10 different spots in the campsite. And I just, it struck me in the chest a couple times. It hit my buddy.
Wow.
It hit our tent, hit my car, hit his backpack, his Coleman cooler, the campfire. It kind of hit everything that we brought, everything that wasn't, organic to the scene there, everything that we brought, including ourselves.
Wow.
Like
Did you feel anything when it hit you in the chest?
Not a thing. Not a thing.
Just an ominous light probing you, but you don't feel it. That is amazing.
Well, and that was the sense that I had was, hey, this thing's checking us out. It really is checking us out. It's scanning us.
Yep.
And
Wow.
again, there was no anxiety or fear of any kind. And we were in this sedated sense. I mean, I was, I really felt mildly sedated. And then as soon as that light turned off, that laser lasted about maybe 3 minutes. And as soon as that turned off, that feeling of calm sedation that I had transitioned to sleepy. And all I wanted to do was get my air mattress and go in that tent and go to sleep. And my friend beat me to it. He stood up and he said, show's over. And I think that's the first thing he said, since the thing started. And he went over and he threw his air mattress in the tent and fell on top of it. And I followed suit, threw mine in. And I didn't bother to take off my shirt or my boots or anything. And that'll come into play in just a bit. So I just fell on top of this air mattress and I was out. I mean, I don't think I was asleep. I think I was unconscious. And that's when they took us.
After you entered the tent is when they took you.
Correct. They took us out of the tent while we were there unconscious. Yeah.
So essentially they anesthetized you and then boom, wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
I was going to ask Terry, was the beings that you saw the one that I put in your advertisement? This one?
Yes.
That's what you saw, that being right there.
That's a pretty good representation of the being that I saw on the ship. That drawing was made by a gentleman from England named Ronnie Kinsella. He and his brother Philip Kinsella are called they're twin brothers. You really cannot tell these two guys apart. But I think their show is called Twin Souls. I've been on their show a couple of times out of London.
Right.
So you probably heard of Philip Kinsella.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, so that's Ronnie's drawing, based pretty much on my description. The only thing I would do a little differently is make the eyes just a little bit larger and all black. But that is the entity that I recalled seeing on the ship. I have some memories, clips of memories from being inside that thing. Now, I've never had a clear linear memory of what happened to us, but I have bits and pieces. And one of the things that I remember was this guy, and I'll tell you the context of it is that, well, I should go back to where I woke up. I woke up in the tent because there were these flashing lights that were just brilliant. Were lit up that tent like a ballpark at night for a millisecond. And they were white and yellow and maybe greenish. And they were the intensity of like an old school flash bulb from the 60s, one of those ones filled with filament on side. It goes off in your face. You see a blue dot every time you blink. They were that intense. And I wake up and I don't have my wits about me. And I'm thinking these are the overhead flashers of a park ranger's truck there to kick us out of the park is what I'm thinking. And while we didn't hear anything at all when this thing glided in and parked over the meadow, Now I'm hearing this droning noise, and it sounds like a big piece of industrial machinery. If you've ever stood next to a diesel locomotive, maybe an idle
Yes.
or something, you know that it's not auditory, that it's not loud with your ears, but you can feel the power in your chest.
Sure.
You know, like a bass speaker at a concert or something.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what this was like. So I'm thinking, like I said, I don't have my wits about me. I'm thinking, you know, park ranger running a generator in the back of the truck, that doesn't make a lot of sense. And I sat up, and when I did, I noticed that my boots had been unlaced almost all the way down. And I knew I didn't do that. I mean, I would have gone to sleep with my boots laced up, which is what I did, or would have taken them off all the way, but I wouldn't have gone to sleep with them like that as a trip hazard in case, for whatever reason, you needed to run.
Sure.
So that annoyed me. I wasn't scared at this point. I felt confused, but I didn't feel any fear. And I took my boots off, and my socks were on sideways. And I knew that I would never do that. And I put them on properly, put my boots back on, laced them up. And then I turned my attention to my friend who's on his knees, and he's peeking out of the tent. And I'm like, "What's out there, Toby? What is it?" "Toby, is it park rangers? What's out there, man?" And he didn't answer me. And I got to my knees, and I pulled back the flap on my side of the tent, and I looked out. And I saw that this thing that had been 3,000 feet over our heads when we went to sleep had descended, and it's now just 30 feet over the meadow. So
Wow.
we are off to the side of it, thankfully, but it's 30 feet above the meadow now. And that's how I was able to see the sides of it and get an idea of its depth. And as I said, it was 5 stories tall. It was as if somebody suspended a medical building or something out there. It was just crazy. And I wasn't really scared at that point either. And then walking around on the meadow, walking around were what I first took to be children, maybe a dozen, maybe 15. And I could see them kind of in silhouette. I could only see them fairly clearly whenever the lights on the triangles would flash, and they were flashing at odd intervals. And that confused me too. And I asked Toby, I said, "Man, what are these kids doing out here in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the night?" And that's when he said to me, "Terry, man, those ain't no little kids. Look at them. They're not human beings. Don't you remember? They took us and they hurt us." And as soon as he said that, my fear went from maybe a 10 to like 100. I mean, over the top. I was absolutely scared to death. And I think both of us were scared to death, afraid that we'd sneeze or cough or do something to draw their attention, you know, and they'd maybe come over and visit us, you know, and we didn't know they were long done with us by this point. So
wow,
we watched as this light came on from the center and underneath of this thing again. And this was a column of white light again, visible white light. And as soon as that clicked on, all these little guys turned their attention toward that light. And I could see them, but they were a fair distance away, but I could see that they were gray. I don't know if that's their natural skin tone or if that was a garment of some kind they wore. And they had a funny gait. They had a real distinctive walk. They walked like their knees were hinged to go backward, maybe an inch or two with each step. So it looked like they were dragging their feet behind them. It's strange. And the first two little guys stepped into this light, and within about 20 seconds, they just pixelated out and they were gone. And while we watched, they, in 2s and 3s, stepped into this light, and within 20, 30 seconds max, they would pixelate out and just be gone. Very much like the Star Trek thing, the old Star Trek thing.
Right.
And when the last 2 little guys were gone, that light shut off, and that droning noise that we'd been hearing stopped. And it was, you know how you listen to something, it became like the bass line. You know, we'd been hearing this noise for so long, we didn't notice it really until it went off. Mm-hmm. And then it was real silent. And we watched this thing take off, and it took off. It didn't take off like a rocket. It just lifted off like a hot air balloon and went straight up in the air. And we saw 3 lights, and then it gained speed as it gained altitude, and then there were just 1 light, and then finally it was gone. And I was scared to death. I didn't want to leave the tent. I told my friend, we had no idea what time it was. Both of our watches, we had nice mechanical wind-up watches that we kept synchronized because they were integral to our job of being EMTs. And both of those watches stopped at 240. Mine stopped at 240 in the nose. Toby stopped at 241. And those watches never worked again.
Wow.
I say they were mechanical wind-up watches. I wish I had saved my watch, but I didn't. But so from there, go ahead, Tim.
I just had a question. What was the duration, do you think, of the actual, from the actual sighting to the actual abduction to when they left? What was the time?
Because our watches didn't work, we don't know. They could have taken us at 240. They could have taken us 10 minutes after we went in the tent. I don't think we have any way of knowing.
Okay.
I can by tracing it backwards, I know that we got up, we woke up about I'd say about an hour before sunrise, because we didn't wait that long in the tent for sunrise to happen. So,
right.
Wow.
Wow, that's a long time.
Like I say, it is, but like I said, I don't know how long we were up there, but.
Wonderful story. And we also know that you've been x-rayed, you've had some implants and things like that. Would you like to tell us about those?
Yeah, I would. You know, that's really important, because that really is the catalyst for me to have written both of these books and to have, to speak publicly about it. Because, when I worked in the law, as you know, and telling the story would have cost me my job with the state for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I would have lost my job, no question. Not only that, I would have lost my, the respect of my peers in the legal community. It would have been a joke,
I completely understand that, completely.
So my wife and I decided to tell no one. And we really even didn't discuss it that often, because every time we did, I had nightmares. So I retired from the state of Vermont in January of 2012 and relocated to Dallas, Texas, where we have adult children and grandchildren. And about October, it was October 25th, I think, I woke up one morning and I couldn't bear weight on my right leg because my knee hurt. And I told my wife, I said, something's wrong with my leg. I got to go to the hospital. So I get all my medical care from the VA. So she took me to the VA emergency room, and I went in and they x-rayed my leg. And the lady that did the x-ray was like, and she did a couple more, and she shot like 3 sets of x-rays on my leg. And she asked me, she said, do you have a shrapnel wound or something that would account for a piece of body or a piece of metal in your body? And I said, no, I never left Missouri, never been in an auto accident, She wanted to know if I'd hurt my right leg in particular around the knee. And I'm like, no, never, skin knee as a kid. And she says, well, you have some anomalies on your x-rays. And I've asked the radiologist to come down and take a look. And I said, well, can I see them? They're my x-rays. And she's like, well, I'll leave that to the radiologist. That's his decision. So radiologist comes down, obviously ticked off that he'd been asked to come down. And he looks at these x-rays, and he looked at the one above my knee, and you can see there's a square structure with 2 wires attached to it. And he popped that up on the view box. And when he did, I could tell, this is kind of zoomed in, but this is an area above my right knee and kind of lateral. And I recognized the spot. It was right above, or pardon me, right below a spot on my knee where when I used to run, that spot would go completely numb. And that was shocking to me. I was a runner. I started running in 1979, and I ran until I had a heart attack in 2005. And I didn't run marathons, but I'd run a couple miles, but I'd run almost every day. And every time I'd hit the 2-mile mark in my run, I mean, give or take 50 yards, the spot on my leg would go completely numb. And I took a safety pin with me one day. And at the end of my run, I could trace the outline of it. It was a perfect circle, about the size of a $50. And it was absolutely numb. And I asked my doctor about it. And she's like, well, does it interfere with your run? And I said, no, not really. And she's like, it sounds like a histemic reaction of some kind. She said, if it doesn't affect your run, I wouldn't worry about it. So I didn't.
Terry, is this the picture you're talking about right here?
That's the picture of the thing below my leg. The structure that you had on there before, the square structure, that's the one above my knee. That's the one that was directly underneath that spot that would go numb.
Okay.
But when I saw this particular x-ray, the one with the square structure, because the radiologist said that's absolutely a square man-made structure. Well, I can agree with half of that at least. I have a friend, a guy I went to law school with, works for the Bureau of Alcohol, well, worked, he just retired, worked for the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. And the BATF has the world's largest database on electrical devices. And the reason they have that is because in 1989, I think, the Lockerbie, Scotland bombing happened. Mm-hmm. And they traced that by retrieving radio parts, little capacitors, transistors, resistors, all kinds of stuff. And by being able to identify those parts, they were able to trace the radio by make and model back to Pakistan. So that's how they identified the Lockerbie, Scotland bomber. And wow. So they created this database that, like I say, has the world's largest. If it's made for electronics in the world, it's going to be in their database. And this thing in my leg is not in their database. So the thing below my leg, the radiologist pops up he popped that one up on the view box. And because before he popped it up, he said, you got some bones in your lower leg. And I was like, well, isn't that normal, or are you supposed to have? and he pops this up and he says, you have bones in the middle of your calf muscle. And he said, I've never seen bones spontaneously sprout in the middle of a calf or in the middle of any muscle, much less arrange themselves in a symmetrical pattern. He said, I've never seen this before. And he said, the thing above my knee, there has to be a scar because while the things below my knee, he thought were bone tissue, the thing above my knee was a manufactured artifact, and he said that would have had to left a scar. Somebody would have had to cut you and embed that in your skin, mm-hmm. and to get it at that depth, there's going to be a scar. And he said, you may not remember it. Maybe it happened. Sometimes we gain and lose weight, and those scars can migrate. I'm like, Doc, I've other than a skinned knee as a kid, I've never had an injury to that leg. And he insisted on looking. He thought he could prove me wrong, and he couldn't find a scar. There is no scar. And that visibly upset him. And I said, well, doctor, let me ask you, if I may, how often is it that you find a foreign object in the human body at this depth, of this size, and there not be a corresponding scar? And he says, never. He said, I've been a radiologist 23 years. And he said, violate the integrity of the skin and get something like this embedded in your skin, there's going to be a scar. He says, I have no way to tell how this thing got into your body. And then I knew. I mean, it validated, it affirmed that these things put their hands on me in 1977, at least. 1977.
That square object is clearly an artificial structure embedded in your body. I mean, that the human body doesn't make anything naturally or otherwise to look anything like that. I mean, that's not a tumor. That's not a bone spur. That's nothing like that. That is defined edges. It's got wires. I mean, that is just amazing. It truly is. Yeah.
Body doesn't have right angles.
What is this, right. Terry? Terry, what is this picture?
That's a picture of my knee from straight on, looking front to back. And if you look, you see that on the right side as you're looking at it, and right below the knee joint, you see that little line of objects. See those there?
Yep.
Yeah, on the right. Correct.
Yeah. That is that floret pattern that you see when you look at it sideways.
Ah, okay.
Oh, this one. Okay,
I see.
gotcha. And this one right here is the
That-
side of the square.
Yes, that is a different animal altogether. I'll tell you what happened was I was warned in October of 2017 as I was writing my book. I had trouble. I couldn't get a surgeon to take these things out of my leg. I just wanted the thing out of the top of my leg. I couldn't get a surgeon to agree to touch the things in the bottom of my leg because they were natural bone, and they wouldn't do that. But the thing above my knee, surgeons were like, "Cool, yeah, I'd like to remove that." And I wanted it out of my leg. But I told them I wanted it removed under a forensic protocol. I wanted to go, like they were removing a bullet for,
Investigation,
right. So following a forensic protocol where they have a chain of custody established, it passes from his hand to my hand or my agent's hand, whoever I designate if I'm, knocked out. And the surgeons were like, "Fine, go get a cardiac clearance letter because you've had a couple heart attacks, and we need a cardiologist to certify that you're good for the surgery." And I couldn't get a cardiologist to do that. And the reason they explained is, well, first of all, the VA cardiologist said, "Look, I got 50,000 vets out there with iron in their body from Iraq or Korea, and they want it out yesterday too. But the standard of care in this country is if it's not causing a problem, it's a risk-benefit analysis. Is the benefit of taking it out, if it's not bothering you, is that worth the risk of an infection or a reaction to the anesthesia or any number of things that could go wrong surgically?" And the answer is no, at least not in this country. So I found a radiologist down in Tijuana who was going to remove it for me. It was, they don't follow standard care in the United States.
Sure.
Right.
And I was going to do that in December of 2017. And right before I published the book, because I wanted to have it in my hand, that was going to be part of my book. And I'm going to cut this a little bit short, but I had an entity in my house, third week in October 2017. I woke up sitting bolt upright in my living room, and there was what I took to be a petite Asian woman sitting directly across from me. And I know this sounds tough to believe, but I'm telling you, this is what happened. And she spoke to me telepathically, and I had that same sedated feeling that I had back in 1977. I wasn't afraid. I wasn't freaked out. I wasn't ready to get a gun. She sat across from me in a non-threatening posture, and I didn't feel threatened by her. And my first thought, I didn't say anything audibly, my first thought was, "Are you here about this thing in my leg?" And I heard her audibly in my head. With crystal clarity, I heard her voice, a female voice, say, "Yes, that's right." And she told me that I should not have it removed, that it can't fall into the hands of terrestrial scientists, and that if I had it removed or made plans to have it removed, that her hosts, HOSTS, would remove it in the middle of the night while I'm asleep. And the word host bugged me because it could mean so many things. It could be a noun, it could be a verb, you could host a dinner party, you could symbiotic, parasitic relationship, there's a host. So I'm like, "Who are your hosts? What is a host?" And she says, "You call them aliens. I call them my hosts. They're not alien to me." And I thought, well, that's kind of poetic almost. And she told me that she was a hybrid. And that was her warning. And on November 17th, about 2.5 weeks later, I woke up and I had terrible pain in my upper legs. I had these deep puncture wounds. They eventually bruised. and had a really kind of a flower pattern, like bruise pattern to them. Those are on my terrylovelace.com page. You can see top of my leg with these bruises. There's a puncture wound in the middle that was real deep, but it didn't bleed. And I woke up in pain, and I told my wife, I said, they came in and got this thing out of my leg last night. And she said, well, you got to go get an x-ray, go find out. And I'm like, boy, where am I going to get an x-ray? Because you can't just walk in and order one.
Sure.
So I thought I'll go to a chiropractor. It's a chiropractor's office not far from us. So, and I know those guys look at 100 x-rays a week. So I took copies of my x-rays on paper with me. And I went, I didn't have an appointment. They were busy, and I waited. This was November 17th, 2017. I waited to see the guy, and he finally calls me back and says, okay, where do you hurt? And I pulled my pants down in the exam room and showed him these puncture wounds. And he's like, man, those are really weird. How did you get those? I'm like, Doc, I don't know. I woke up with them. And he said, well, were you in some kind of accident? And I said, no, Doc, you're busy. So I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. You see, in 1977, while I was on active duty in the United States Air Force, I think I was abducted from a campground. And I think that I had an implant in my leg, and I think they came and took the thing out. And I'm here to see if you could x-ray my leg for me and confirm that. And he's like, all right, then. And I pull up my pants, and he has me by the elbow, and he's escorting me toward the front door because he thinks I'm crazy. But I know these guys look at 100 x-rays a week. So I held up those pieces of paper showing these things. And about 3 feet from the door, he stopped. And he took the pieces of paper and he said, follow me. And I went back to his office. We went in his office, and he shut the door and locked it. And his phone's ringing, and people were knocking at the door. And I sat down in front of his desk, and he put the pieces of paper in front of me and said, tell me about these. Give me the capsule version. And I said, well, Doc, pretty much what I said. And he said, okay. He says, I don't have x-ray equipment here. He says, we use a freestanding radiology clinic just down the road. It's about a mile away. I'll write a prescription for you to have the x-ray. I'll pay for your x-ray.
Wow.
But you promised me you won't use my name or the name of my clinic in your book. And I've honored that. So I went down and I got an x-ray, and I went out to my car, and they gave them to me. They gave the films to me, and I put them up. It was a sunny day. I put them up, and I could see that the thing above my knee was gone.
Wow.
And I had really conflicted emotions about that. I mean, in a way it was like, boy, I'm glad it's out. But in a way, for some reason, I felt depressed. And I don't understand that emotion. But I dropped the x-rays off at his office. And by the way, the things below my leg are still there. They're untouched. I dropped the x-rays off at his office, and he showed them to me. He called me up on the phone, and he said, did you know that they may have taken that artifact out above your knee, but did you see that they left something in your leg? And I'm like, no, I didn't see that. I don't know where to look. So I went down to his office, and he showed me. And he said there are two wires, they're parallel, close together. On the black and white image in my book, it just looks like a white line. But if you hold the x-ray film up to a light source, you can see they are two distinct little wires lying next to one another. And I said, Doc, if these things are so far above us, evolutionary, they're so more intelligent than we are, how could they be so inept as to leave these wires in my leg? And he said, you don't get it. They don't do anything by accident. He said, these two little wires in your leg are probably an upgrade. They probably gave you the 2017 model of the 1977 model they took out.
Wow.
And, if you think about it, that kind of makes sense. I look how much our technology has advanced since 1977.
Absolutely.
So I feel like I'm still trapped. I've got those two little wires next to my femur. I'm not going to have them removed because they'd have to cut real deep into tissue into my thigh to get them out. And I'm just not going to have that done. I'm going to let them lay.
Let me ask you this. Have you ever had any kind of test done in that area to see if it's emitting any kind of a radio wave or any kind of a signal of any kind?
Yes. There's the Kling brothers are from Austin, Texas. And the Kling brothers had a ghost show on for a while, maybe 10 years ago or so. And they called their show Ghost Lab. And I met them at a conference, and they asked me if I'd come to Austin, and they wanted to record my story because they heard me speak at this conference. And I said, sure, I'd be glad to. So my wife and I went up there, and they have a little studio set up in the basement of their house. You know, they got a nice sound booth, and they got a board with all the stuff on it, and they got a sound guy there. And I told my story, and I had I forget the name of it, the little mic that clips onto your lapel. So I had a mic, and I told my story. We're done. I'm finished. And I went to take this thing off my lapel, and it fell into my lap. And as soon as it did, it landed about halfway down my right leg. And the sound guy pushes his earphones close to his ear, and he tells everyone, shh. And every guy goes quiet, and he's listening. And instinctively, I picked up that mic, and I laid it right over that thing above my knee. And when I did that, he said, I hear mariachi music.
Oh, really?
Seriously.
Wow.
And
Wow.
they have this on film. And it was they listened, and one of the guys spoke Spanish, and it was an AM radio station broadcasting out of Mexico. So yeah, my knee was broadcasting mariachi music for some reason.
How about that?
So it was some kind of radio transmitter that technology-based implant.
Yeah, something. I mean, I wish I knew what it did.
Sounds a lot like a radio tag we'd use on an animal or a shark or something like that, maybe.
Yeah, that was exactly my thought, Tommy. It's like, what we do to land on the Serengeti plane,
Yeah.
So, Tag them, yeah.
What I was going to ask you is, you said that you remember bits and pieces of being on board the ship. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
I sure can. And I only have a few, but they're kind of dramatic. And my first memory was I found myself, I opened my eyes, and I was standing in this ship. And they had stripped us. That's why my boots were on sideways, because they took all of our clothing off and then redressed us. And I'm holding my boots and all my clothing in my hands like this. And I'm paralyzed. I can't move a thing. I am like a statue. And the only thing I can move is my eyeballs. I can swivel my eyeballs around and see as far as I want to. And I will say this, I'm not sure if they put me on this ship and then took us somewhere else, because that could be. But the inside of the place that we were at was much larger. I mean, while the thing that we saw looked like a 5-story office building, this thing, whatever it was like an NFL stadium. I mean, it was just insane. And I don't get that. But I have heard people have written to me and said that they've been in craft and the inside looked much larger than the outside. Who knows? Maybe they got different physics that apply. I don't know. But there was a massive place. Everything was gray or white like porcelain or stainless steel. And I was standing in this big atrium, and I could perceive my friend was next to me. I couldn't really lay eyes on him, but I could almost, if I strained my eyes to the left, I could almost see him. But somehow I knew he was there. And there were those little gray guys who were running around all over the place. And I have a theory about them real quick. And I think there are probably a dozen varieties, because people say, oh, no, that's not right. Grays don't look like that. They look like this. Well, I can only tell you what I saw. I can tell you honestly, without embellishment, objectively what I saw. And I think these things are manufactured. I think there's some kind artificial intelligence, quantum computing, nanotechnology, some biological matter thrown in, and I think they come off an assembly line. In my book, I think I referred to them as drones or worker bees, one or the other. But they just seemed task oriented. They're running around. You didn't see any slacking off. They were all kind of like doing something. And I saw this guy walk, because the little gray guys were about 3 feet tall. And I saw this guy who was 6 foot tall and was humanoid. He had no hair. He had no cartilage for ears, but I could see holes for ear canals. He had just a bump for a nose with 2 nostrils and a small slit for a mouth. His eyes were not the huge, exaggerated black eyes like you see in the motion pictures. This guy's eyes were about, kind of pretty much like Ronnie's figure, more like a wraparound Ray-Bans, and they were black. And his complexion really wasn't gray. It was kind of a chalkish pink. I know Ronnie made him look gray, but yeah, the guy that I saw was actually kind of a chalkish pink and had the jet black eyes about twice that size. And they were all black. There was no sclera or pupil that you could see. It was just a gloss black. Mm-hmm. And as I strained my eyes to the left, he just by happenstance turned his head to his left, and we locked eyes. And of a couple memories that I have, this is the most frightening memory of being on that ship. And it was, the guy was in my head. And I don't know any other way to say it than he was in my head. And it felt like the biggest invasion of privacy in your life. I mean, I felt like the guy knew me, knew my wife, he knew my history, he knew my secrets, he knew everything about me in a millisecond.
Wow.
And, all that radiated back from those eyes was just intellect. It was humbling. It really was. The example that I give is when our kids were little, we had an English setter, good dog. And she'd come over and put her head in my lap, and I would pet her. And she had those big brown eyes, like setters do. And she'd look up at me. And her eyes would radiate to me loyalty, love, trust. But she knew I was the alpha. We each knew our respective roles.
Right.
And in this equation with this guy on board this ship, I felt like the dog. I felt like this thing was 500 rungs up the evolutionary ladder from me.
Really?
And that was an epiphany. That to realize that we're not top dog, that we're not the be-all, end-all, top of the food chain, that was a revelation to me. I never had any idea that there were other living sentient beings out there that were that far advanced from us. But there are, as I met him. And that's haunted my sleep for 45 years, almost 44 years now.
I can imagine. Well, if I may, do you have any theories on their agenda? Do you have any thoughts on that at all?
God, I wish I did. I can make assumptions all day long. There were a couple of other things inside that craft that I saw that I should mention. And that was that, there were some other people that were segregated off to our right. And we weren't a part of their party. But this was a mixed bag of men, women, and children. This wasn't men, And they were situated like us. They had all been stripped, and they were all holding their hands, their clothing in their hands at the same level we were. And I could not tell, because I couldn't turn my head, how far back this row and this column, or how far back the columns went. I could just see the first couple rows. So there could have been 20 people there. There could have been 2,000 people there. I don't know. But they were all crying, and they were all moving their eyes all over the place. So it was frightening. And they kicked us out. They kicked Toby and me out. We found ourselves. I landed near my car. We landed near my car. And I'm half conscious or less. And I remember thinking, these guys screwed up. They should have put us back in the tent where they found us. And I swear, as soon as I had that thought, 4 little gray guys show up, and they dragged us. These things are strong. They dragged us over and just tossed us inside the tent.
Wow.
And then I was out again. And then I woke up with the flashing lights, and that kind of brings the story full circle.
Wow, instantly. That's amazing. My goodness. Tim, what are your thoughts?
I was going to ask you, Terry, have you had any reoccurrences since 1977, other than the one that you explained to us when they removed the object?
I've had one significant event happen, and it's in my book. What happened was, since the 1980s, back when there was a Sony Walkman, I used to go to sleep at night with those foam head, earphones that came with.
You bet.
Right.
And listen to a tape or something, because PTSD, I have to sleep with the light on. And I need something so I don't hear these ambient noises in the middle of the night that would freak me out. I'd have to get up and, get a gun and check things out, and just, this way I can usually get a good night's sleep. So I have an iPhone, an older one, but because I have heart disease, I have to have a special case that shields the EMF. And I sleep with that in the pocket of a t-shirt with a pocket on it. And I sleep that way every night with earbuds. And I listen to meditative tapes, binary beats, Monroe Institute, Hemisync stuff. And what happened was, it was April 16th, 2019. And I got some pictures here I can show you. In the Red Book, these are on pages 197 through 199. What happened was, I woke up at 5:55 a.m., that weird triple digit thing.
Right.
And I woke up out of breath. I mean, I was like, felt like I'd run 100 yards, and I couldn't catch my breath. I didn't have any chest pain, but I couldn't catch my breath. And I thought, this has to be, cardiac involved or something. So I told my wife, I think I'm having some kind of heart problem, call an ambulance. And she did. And they got there right away. And they did a thing on my finger to check my oxygen level. My oxygen level was 96. And so I was starved for oxygen, and my pulse was tachycardic at like 160 or something crazy. My blood pressure was 210 over 110. Just outrageous vital signs. And they took me to the hospital, and within 30 minutes, all of my vital signs went back to normal. My pulse was back to normal. My blood pressure, my oxygen saturation was back up to 100%. And I didn't have any pain or discomfort. So, I mean, I know the drill. I've had enough heart attacks to know, going down, I'm going to get a chest X-ray, an EKG, and cardiac enzymes. Those are the three things that they use. And I had those, and they all came back normal. No evidence of a heart involved incident whatsoever. So they kept me about 6 hours total, and they kicked me out. They said, we think that you had some kind of errant, heartbeat, and wanted me to follow up my cardiologist at the VA. I'm like, yeah, sure I will. And I did. And so they kicked me out. I got home that night, and I didn't think much about it. I just thought, a medical condition, right? So I ate dinner with my wife, and then I went out to take my walk. At night, I go out for about a half a mile to a mile walk every night after dinner. I'm a creature of habit. And I went out to the sidewalk, and I pulled my phone out of my pocket, and I looked at my health app, my Apple Health app that's on here. And the first screen, I don't know how well this will show up, but
Oh no, we can see it. Yeah.
Very well.
And if you look at there are three squares there. If you look at the bottom, it says flights climbed or stairs climbed. And it says 6 floors. So it says that I climbed 6 flights of stairs. I live in a 1-story Texas ranch house with a 4-inch threshold. There are no stairs in my house.
Wow.
Now this is the second screen that shows, this is really an XY graph, okay, where the going up vertically shows distance in 10-foot increments. And then the x-axis here that goes across shows the passage of time. So the significance of this is it shows that I climbed 6 flights of stairs between 5:23 and 5:24 a.m.
Straight up. Amazing.
I couldn't climb 6 flights of stairs in a minute. Oh, and I also have copies of my medical bills dated for, I thought that they would be good to include, because if it was a hoax, it was sure an expensive one.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
So I took my phone. I didn't understand. And I took my phone to the Apple store, and lady there said she was an electrical engineer. Actually, she said, yeah, I'll do a diagnostic on it for you. You know, go grab some lunch or something, come back in an hour or two, and I'll have it done. And they took it very seriously. Apple really gave my phone a good look and said, there's nothing wrong with the app. There's nothing wrong with your phone. And I said, well, you know, what does this mean? I mean, how does this measure height? Is this done by GPS? And she's like, no, not at all. She says it measures height, and I didn't know this, by change in barometric pressure.
Really?
Wow.
That's what I said. I said, and is that accurate? I mean, barometric pressure changes all the time with the weather.
Sure.
And she says, no. Weather changes gradually. She says, this will show change in barometric pressure. She says it's accurate within 6 inches.
Wow.
And she said that I can tell you that your phone was 60 feet above your house between 5:23 and 5:24 a.m. on April 16th, 2019.
That is just amazing. That is corroborating evidence big time. Really is.
You know, it's anecdotal at best, but I feel that it's strong evidence.
I think it's strong evidence too.
I've since had 3 people who had the same experience with Fitbit, wearing a Fitbit watch.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Terry, you were telling me in our pre-interview, you were telling me that you knew of a lady from Turkey that had the same kind of trace evidence that I have.
Yes.
Can you talk about that?
I sure can. Her name is Sev Tok, S-E-V, and her last name is T-O-K. She has a book published called You Have the Right to Talk to Aliens, or something similar. She's an experiencer. She's had some experiences, and she's run into very good aliens. But she had 2 sets of marks on her back that look very similar. And her name really is Sev, by the way. I mean, she's from Turkey. She moved here as an infant, and that's her natural name, is Sev Tok. And you know, well-educated, articulate, wonderful lady. And you can find her. I think she has a website, and you can find her books on her book on Amazon. But yeah, her experience was that she woke up with this stuff, and it seems like it's given her abilities. You know, I can say that for me, I won't say that I'm psychic, but I'll say that every time I've had interaction with non-human entities, my intuition has gone through the roof in crazy ways. I went out in January and I dumped a bunch of stock I sold a bunch of stock that I had, and I bought shares in Moderna, and this was before they announced COVID. So I had one of the examples. I think this is a great example. I went to the feed store to buy some bird seed because all my life I fed the birds. I think that's important. We've taken enough of their land. We can give them a little back. And I bought a 25-pound bag of bird seed, and I put it on my shoulder, and I paid the lady. And she's like, "Oh, I'm out of pennies, or I'm out of nickels, rather." She said, "I'm going to give you some pennies." I'm like, whatever is easier for you. So she gave me 6 cents or something. And the second those pennies hit my hand, I knew that there was a wheat penny in there. And for those who might not know, the back of the 1 cent piece has a picture of the Lincoln Memorial on it today, or it may have the shield that says 1 cent. But back in the day, 1959 or before, pennies had 2 wheat sheaves on either side, and it spelled out 1 cent in the center.
Right.
And those are called wheat pennies, for those who may not know. And I knew that there was a wheat penny in that change. I knew it. And I just stuck it in my pocket because I got this bird seed I'm trying to maneuver. And I get it in the car, and I get home and put my bird seed down, and I go over to my change jar where I throw my change, and I pulled it out, and I looked through those pennies, and sure enough, there was a wheat penny, and it was dated 1955, which happens to be the year of my birth.
How about that?
Oh,
How about that? Is that a coincidence?
Mhm. If I may, Terry, I did have one question. You've been married for decades, and I'm just wondering, has your wife ever had any kind of experiences or physical, evidence or anything like that?
One. She said one and only one. Now, I've had experiences where, and recently, where I've seen UFOs in the sky. I've seen, cigar-shaped silver things in the sky. And I'm like, look at that. And she's like, what? I don't see anything. I've got pictures of these. She can't see them. She can see them once I take the photograph, but she can't see them. But in 1987, the same year that I had 2 hours of missing time while on a motorcycle ride, she was in bed, and she rolled over and noticed I wasn't in bed, and the bathroom light and the hall light wasn't on, and she was going to get up, and then she noticed at the foot of our bed there was a kind of a large window, and there was a street light outside. Our bedroom was on a second floor, and she saw this woman, so what she thought was a tiny 3-foot tall woman silhouetted against this window. And she claims that this woman looked at her, and she couldn't see her face clearly, but she swears her lips never moved, but she heard her audibly in her head, as clear as any spoken word. She heard, "Everything's okay, go back to sleep." And that's what she did. She rolled over and went back to sleep. And it wasn't the next day, it was the following day. She said, I had this dream that I don't think was a dream, and I got to tell you about it. And she told me, and I thought, I don't think it was a dream.
Wow.
I don't.
wow.
And I think, yeah.
Have you ever been regressed for any of your abduction experiences?
Only for one. This incident that happened on April 16th of 2019 really bothered me. And I have a good friend in Dallas who's a practicing psychiatrist. He's got 30, 40 years of practice. He's my age. And he still carries a full patient load, works every day. And I met him at a MUFON meeting, of all places. I've never been a MUFON member, but I was speaking at the MUFON, Dallas MUFON up in Grapevine, Texas. And I met him there. And he said he was a psychiatrist. And I said, what's up with a psychiatrist doing at a MUFON meeting? I'm just curious. And he says, well, when I was in medical school, they taught me that if someone comes in and claims that, they've been abducted, that he said by aliens, he said that's probably the result of some kind of underlying psychopathy or personality disorder, maybe a hallucination of some kind, but there has to be some kind of cause. It's not aliens. Can't be. They don't exist, right? Everybody knows that. So he said, I've been doing this a long time. And he says, I got some very credible people who come into my office and tell me they're having nightmares from being abducted. And he said, I send them to a psychologist for a full battery of tests. They come back normal. He said, I talked to them. And he said, I started to regress them. And he said, there's nothing wrong with these people. He said, I think they're telling me the truth. So he's a friend. I trust him. And in December of 2019, we did a regression up in his office. And I think it was a little difficult because we were friends. It took me a while to relax. And it was the first time I'd been hypnotized since my Air Force days, whenever the OSI had me hypnotized. So I finally got relaxed, and he took me back to being in my bedroom on April 16th, 2019. And he said, okay, I want to go back to 5:20 a.m. And where are you? And I said, I think I'm in bed asleep next to my wife. And he said, did anything happen next? And I said, yeah, they took me. And he said, how do you know they took you? And I said, and I got a video of the session. I said, I went straight up, and I went up and I went through the ceiling, and I popped out. I went through the insulation. I could see it clear as day. Well, I can't say that because it was dark, but I could perceive it was there because there were vents on the side of the house, and I could see, and I popped out on the other side of the roof and kept going up, same speed. I just went through, wood and insulation and shingles like it was nothing. I just kept at a steady pace going straight up, and above me was a saucer, and the underneath of the thing opened like a camera lens and expanded, and it was just a black inside. And I was going up, and I was almost in the thing, and I screamed, and he took my blood pressure because he's an MD, and he's like, we're going to stop here and we'll pick it up later. Well, one thing led to another, and January hit, and then I was in San Francisco for a couple of weeks, and then COVID hit, and then February 2021, or February 2020 rather. It's like we lost a whole year, isn't it?
It really is. It really is.
So we never did get a chance to do that. But now he feels more comfortable. He's been fully immunized, and I have too. So we're going to make plans and do that again soon, and pick up where we left off and get the whole story. And when I do, I'll let you know.
Yeah, we'd like to have you back for that so that we could learn more about what you're going through and what you're experiencing. Because I think people in our chat room, along with a lot of people online, have also experienced sort of the same type of situations, maybe with separate differences, but at least some situations where they have felt they've been abducted and have experienced trace evidence. I have experienced trace evidence and some other things as well. So it's interesting to know what you know.
Well, I thought that I was unique. I really did. I had no idea because I never discussed this with people. I didn't go to MUFON meetings. I mean, until 2017, I avoided this topic totally. And then I immersed myself in it in 2017. What's interesting is that as soon as I really got into this and started writing the book and researching it and doing all the work, I felt guilty for some reason. And I had a dramatic weight loss. It felt like I was violating some kind of fiduciary trust, or, like you were telling the family secret or something. Mm-hmm. And I think that speaks to the level of influence that these things have over us. I can tell you that I in the back of Incident at Devil's Den, I included an email address, and I said, look, if you've had an experience and you want to share it with someone, I'd love to hear your story. I promise I'll respond. And I thought maybe I'd get 100 people emailing me. Well, I've had over 1,700 emails now from people.
Wow.
And they're not all on point. But there's a big chunk of them where people, and I'm a big data guy, so I like to lay stuff out on a spreadsheet and look for commonalities and demographics. And I was surprised to see that most of the stories that I got about abductions were people 50 years of age and older.
Really?
Yeah. People that have said that I had these vague memories, but more has come back to me as I've gotten older, and now I'm interested in it. And now the nightmares have returned and whatever. And another interesting demographic is that and all these people that emailed me, all the people that had kind of what I call intimate interaction with ET. I don't mean just seeing a silver disc dart across the sky. I mean, have something like an abduction or, an entity in your bedroom.
Mhm.
They all tell me that, that it's real funny that when they were between the ages of 2 and 6, they had this funny dream, and they can remember the details of this dream like it happened last night. And it may just be something weird. It may be something just totally off the wall, but they had this stupid little dream that they've kept with them for a lifetime. I don't care if they're 50, 60, 70 years old. And I emailed them all back and I asked them 3 questions. I said, can you tell me what you got for Christmas that year? Can you tell me who was at your birthday party? Can you tell me where your family went for vacation? And all except a couple. And I sent about 70 of those emails out. All except a couple couldn't answer a single question. They said, I don't know. That's all lost. That's all fuzzy.
Really?
But they can remember that stupid little dream. And those are the people that tended to have more intimate contact with ET.
That's kind of concerning for me because I've had a reoccurring dream of a landscape where it's red dirt, red dust in the air, and like stone houses that are dome shaped. And I have it probably 2-3 times a week.
Whoa. Did you have that as a child?
Yes. And as a child, I also had an incident where I woke up one night, and in my room there were like huge fireflies everywhere, just little yellow lights all throughout my room. And it was really weird because I tried to recreate them. I thought it was static from my blanket, but it wasn't. They were flying outside of my blanket all through my room, and then they disappeared. They just blinked out. And it's something that I haven't told anyone before. This is the first time, and I don't know what that was.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I can tell you this, that I had little monkeys in my room when I was a kid. And I saw them plain as day, and I thought they were kind of comical at first. And I tell in my second book, I had a cousin down in Arkansas who had 2-foot-tall clowns. And I had people email me and say they saw orbs of light, that they saw, one lady said she saw Disney characters. This kid from down in El Paso, who I ended up talking to by phone, talking to him and his mother. Mom told most of the story, but I talked to the kid too. Saw 2-foot-tall. He said that this thing would enter his room as a glowing orb of light, would come through the screen and would transform into a 2-foot-tall possum, standing on 2 legs and walking like a man. And he said that this possum would talk to him in his head, telepathically. And he could never remember what they talked about, but they talked for a long time. And then he would go back into an orb and fly out of the room. And that's when the kid would scream. So Mom, they were living in a mobile home in South El Paso, and Mom had set up her couch outside his door. And she slept on the couch because he was so wigged out about this, walking, talking possum. And one night she heard him talking, and she sat up in bed, and there was this orb of light in front of his crib. And as soon as she got up off the sofa, it went through the screen and disappeared. And he asked her, Mommy, did you see it? It was the possum. And his story is in the back of the red book. My Spanish is not too good, but he used the word for possum. I can't pronounce it, but it's in there. We communicated via a translator.
I wonder if the clowns and the monkeys and the lights that I saw were just screen memories.
I think so. You know what I think? I think these things are smart enough to know the most benign way to appear. They know how to appear to us in a way that we won't freak out, we won't go crazy. I think it's a very individualized system. I think that they know how to appear, and that's what they do. But they do it a lot because I've talked to people that said owls and rabbits and deer and all kinds of chickens and birds and all kinds of crazy things appeared in their room when they were kids.
Mm-hmm. You know, this is clearly happening to people, and running a UFO channel. Don't get me wrong. I mean, there's a lot of times that we'll get contact with someone that's really kind of out there. Okay. But then, like you said, there's that sliver of people that are really credible. And it's just amazing how many of people have come forward with their abduction experiences, and especially with like regression therapy and things like that. Because I remember as a kid listening to the Betty and Barney Hill therapy sessions, the hypnosis sessions, and to listen to Barney Hill, I mean, he was either very agitated and upset during that, or he should win an Oscar for his performance because it was bone chilling. And so this is happening to people. This is a real thing. This is not something that is made up. It's not a hallucination. I mean, there's evidence. We have evidence of implants in people, things of that nature. Terry, a great example of one of those. So, you know, what does this all mean? I mean, where are we at this point? Can we really continue to ignore what's going on here and write it off as people's fantasies, or, you know, whatever's going on in their lives?
Or write it off as sleep paralysis. I mean,
right.
Come on.
A lot of people, like, it is a legitimate phenomenon, sleep paralysis, but you can't rule out the fact that abductions are occurring. I mean, we have reports from all over the globe. It's not just here.
Right.
The same type of abductions that happened to Terry are also happening in like tribal Africa or the Amazon forest. So people that don't have contact with the internet are still getting abducted.
Absolutely.
So if that's the case, like Terry said in his write-up, they're treating us like lab rats.
Yeah.
Like specimens in a laboratory experiment. And not all aliens are like that, of course. But in Terry's instance, what did you refer to them as, Terry? Monsters?
Yeah, when I was a little kid, I didn't, you know, ET or aliens wasn't in my vocabulary. It just wasn't, you know, there were flying saucers on television. Well, I saw one in my backyard when I was 8, but yeah, the monkeys that came into my room, I didn't associate with extraterrestrials. I thought they were some kind of monsters. That's what I thought they were.
Right. Did you think it might be just a sense of indifference, the way they treat us? Like they look at us as small children, rather, because you know, we're not as advanced.
Yeah, you know what? I think we're lucky that they don't, you know, discard us like mold in a petri dish. I think that they are so far above us. I got to tell you, my interaction with the one that I locked eyes with was so frightening because I never envisioned anything to have that, any living entity to have that kind of intellect. And it was clearly non-human entity. And but you know what? I came out of this misadventure with a lot of anger toward them. And but I've kind of mellowed over the years, over the past 44. I mean, you know, I don't appreciate the screaming nightmares twice a year, but you know, other than that, you know, when I reflect back on it, you know, they could have killed me. They could have taken me somewhere. You know, they could have fed me to, you know, dogs or whatever they do. I don't know. Any kind of bad thing they could have done to me, but they really didn't. You know, and they kicked us out. What does bother me is those other people that I saw in there that didn't get out. And I know that they went up with that thing. And that's been a point of concern for me for all these years, is what happened to those souls? Where did they go? You know,
right.
Hoovered them home? I don't think so.
You said earlier in your pre-interview, or actually, I think I read it in your write-up, that you lost Tobias. Can you elaborate on that?
I sure can. And this is something I don't understand. You know, when we went down to Devil's Den for this camping trip, we went down there as teenagers. I mean, I was 22, he was 23. We were both married. Yeah, we were both living on, you know, on base and family housing. Technically, we were adults, but we were a couple kids, really. And when we left that plateau, we were adults. That was the end of my childhood. And something else that changed, and that is that this guy that I'd worked with for 3 years, our wives were the best of friends. You know, when we had a day off, we'd maybe barbecue together or, you know, go out and play volleyball, do something. So we were friends. And when we left this plateau, for some reason, I wanted nothing to do with the guy. And I really couldn't reconcile that emotion. But I think that speaks to the level of influence that these things can have over us. Because I think I have more character than to suddenly, you know, write somebody off as not my friend anymore. And it just doesn't, that's not me. But that's what happened. And, you know, I felt that way and I couldn't shake that feeling. We had a 6.5 hour drive back to Whiteman Air Force Base. And the only thing we discussed was, and this is unnatural too, we both agreed that come what may, no matter what happened, we would not admit to seeing a UFO, you know, the size of Walmart. We're just not going to do that.
Right.
And we had an ethical issue because neither one of us would lie. You know, we wouldn't lie. So we made a pact and we agreed that we would tell them the truth, that we went to bed feeling funny, woke up sick as dogs. And we were sick as dogs when we woke up, by the way. I'd suffered the worst, like sunburn all over my body. I didn't burn, I didn't peel, didn't blister, but I had this terrible burn. I had these, what they call flash burns to my eyes, which is what an arc welder would get if they didn't wear that hood.
Sure.
Right.
And that's really painful. It feels like you have sand in your eyes. Mm-hmm. And we were both acutely dehydrated, dangerously so. So they hurt us, but I think it was collateral damage. I don't think it was intentional. I don't think it was meant as a intentional torture session or anything like that. I think it was collateral damage. So when we got back to base, we knew that if we told, in 1977, if we told a commissioned officer in the medical corps that we had a run-in with a UFO, we would have been sent out for a psych evaluation.
Oh, sure, sure.
And, you know, that could have been the end of our career. That could have ended my, you know, I wanted an honorable discharge. I served honorably. I deserved that. You know, I certainly wanted the GI Bill. That was kind of the object of the exercise. And so we agreed on that. But, you know, other than that short conversation, we didn't say a word to one another all the way back. And that's not normal. You know, two people that go through some kind of traumatic event like we went through, mm-hmm. Human nature is you want to debrief. You want to talk about it. You want to, you know, man, did you see what I saw? And what were those things? And, you know, mm-hmm. Bolster each other's story. And we didn't do that. We didn't talk about it.
I've had exactly the same experience with a group of people who had an experience that I was involved in. And on the trip back after what just happened, and nobody said a word. We never spoke about it. In fact, the woman that I was with at the time, we were together for another year and we never spoke about it. So it's not something that, you know, you sit around the breakfast table and talk about every day. And I think that's what a lot of people sort of believe is that, oh, you've had this awesome experience. Now you just want to share it with everybody you meet. Well, no, that's really not the way it goes. Not until you get ready to do so, not until you get there, you know. Myself, I always had to keep my story secret because being an IT, being a government employee, you know, you have to really maintain a certain level of credibility. And I was also concerned about, ridicule as well.
Sure.
But yeah, so I know exactly where you're coming from there. Absolutely.
You know, I don't mean dozens, I mean hundreds of people email me, and their stories are in the back of this book. And they tell me that, you know, same thing, that they had an experience and afterward, you know, like a group of friends, 4 or 5 friends, you know, it's like the band breaks up. Everybody goes in a different direction. Sure. Nobody wants to talk about it. You know, there's a great example in Ray Fowler's excellent book called The Allagash Four about the guys from 1973, I think it was, who were on a fishing trip on the Allagash, off the Allagash River on this lake.
Yeah.
Right. They were canoeing. Yep.
Yeah, they were canoeing. They were fishing at night. They built a big bonfire.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep.
And, you know, if you read his book, Ray Fowler explains that, you know, they rowed back into shore and, just all went to their tents and went to bed. And there were four of them, the brothers, Jim and Jack Weiner, and then a guy named Rack, R-A-K, and I forget the fourth guy's name. But they all hung out together. They fished together, hunted together, drank together. And then all of a sudden, you know, the band breaks up. Everybody goes in a different direction. And it's so common. I got hundreds of examples of people that had that experience. Mm-hmm. My own sister would not talk about this topic. She passed away last year, and I put the book out, and she wouldn't read the book. But about a year before she passed away, she says, I don't want to talk about it, but I'll say this. I feel bad that we couldn't have been of more help whenever the lights would come through the window and you weren't in the house anywhere.
Ooh, so she saw something too.
Sure she did.
Interesting.
And my other sister, I have two older sisters. My other sister is like, I don't know what you guys are talking about. You're all crazy. I don't know.
So what happened to Tobias?
Tobias got transferred at light speed to Japan. And I don't know if you guys, I'm sure you guys have heard of Robert Hastings, who wrote UFOs and Nukes.
Yes.
Yes.
And he's a kind of a friend. We talk often. And he told me that in the military, you know, if you got four guys that see something, you know, a little more intimate than a saucer darting across the sky, that everybody will get transferred. And everybody will get interrogated. Everybody will be told, you didn't see that. That doesn't exist. And everybody will be asked to sign an NDA. And he said that's common procedure. And I was ordered not to have any contact with Toby. None. Not verbally, not through third parties. You know, I'm not to give him anything. He's not to give me anything. Just a long list of the no contact stuff. And I was sternly worded by the hospital commander, Sergeant, if you disobey this order, there will be consequences. Do you understand? And I'm like, consequences? I understand consequences. I don't understand the reason why. But you know what? I really was okay with that. I really wanted nothing to do with the guy. But he only had about 6 weeks before he shipped out. And I had this really strong compulsion. I didn't want anything to do with the guy. But on the other hand, I felt like I deserved to tell him goodbye. I felt like I owed him that. So I disobeyed the order, stopped by his house, went in to see him, walked up to the door, same door I've walked through 100 times, knocked 3 times, opened the door. Hey, it's me, guys. Door's never locked. I went inside, and his wife just glared at me and said, you're not supposed to be here. And I said, I know. I'm just here to say goodbye to my friend. And Toby must have heard this exchange, and he walked around the corner, and he's about 6 inches. I'm 6 foot. He was probably about 5'6", 5'7". And he walked around the corner, and he just looked terrible. He was just a train wreck. I mean, his hair was sideways. He hadn't shaved. He had on dirty clothing. He was barefoot. Now, I mean, the guy was packing to move, so I cut him some slack for that. But this was out of character for the guy. And, you know, I thought it would be appropriate to hug the guy and slap him on the back and say, great working with you, man. You know, wish you best of luck. Have fun in Japan. Mm-hmm. And I didn't do that. To be honest with you, when I saw him, I felt stunned or something. It wasn't, you know, I went there expecting to shake hands with him at least and say, yeah, man, you know, glad that's over. We lived through that, and walk away from it with some kind of closure. Well, that didn't happen at all.
Right. And
he walked up to me, and now Toby was always meticulous about his appearance, and he was never a drinker. You know, he might drink a beer, maybe a beer and a half at a barbecue, tops. And he walked right up to me, and he looked like he was going to cry. And he looked up at me, and he said, it happened, didn't it, Terry? And I said, yes, my brother, it really happened. You're not losing your mind. And he said, yeah, but why us? And that just hit me like a slap in the face. And I said, man, I don't have a clue. And I turned around and I ran out of the house. And I felt, I guess, unsettled would be the right word. I didn't feel good, you know, and I really didn't want anything to do with him again. What happened was that his wife left him. They separated shortly after he got to Japan. she moved back to the States with the 2 kids and divorced. They divorced. And she contacted my wife when we were up in Michigan. And she got together with us. Her and her new husband were on their way to Detroit. Long story, but they stopped. We had dinner together. And it was a little awkward because I want to talk about her ex, you know, and she's got her new husband here. But I did manage to get some information, and that was that, you know, and I got to admit, I had my struggles too right after this. You know, this wasn't an easy thing to walk away from. But with Toby couldn't get to sleep at night unless he was hammered. Now, he never went to bars, she said. He didn't drink during the day, but he would start to get nervous as the sun went down. And I kind of relate to that. I mean, the poor guy was afraid to close his eyes. And, you know, sometimes I feel that way. And I think it's, you know, when we're asleep, we're vulnerable. And that's when the monsters come in, right? So I still sleep with the light on. But she said that, you know, an hour before bed, he'd start slamming shots of vodka and pass out. It was the only way he could get to sleep. Of course, if you do that every night, you know, it's going to affect your physical and your mental health.
Oh, sure. Mm-hmm.
Right.
So he deteriorated. And there's an interesting story I tell in the back of The Reckoning. In the 80s, I was working on a case that involved the FBI. And I think the world of the FBI. I've met a bunch of them. They've always been I know them as people that are a cut above. They're the best of the best. I mean, I met an agent who was also a lawyer before he went to the FBI Academy in Quantico, and he was near retirement, and we were working together on a case from different sides. Of course, I wasn't affiliated with law enforcement at that time, and on Friday nights sometimes we'd get together and go have a beer at the pub, you know, and one night I asked him, I said, "Hey, I'm trying to find a buddy of mine I can't find. You think you could find him for me?" Now, this is FBI humor, so you got to think about it for a minute, because this is how dry his humor was. He says, "Yeah, I can find anybody, so long as they're not a fugitive." Because, you know, that's kind of his job, you know. So I laughed, and you know, so he knew that I got it. And he said, "Do this." He said, "Write down on a couple sheets of paper everything you know about the guy, his likes, his dislikes, family members' names, where he came from, everything that can remember about the guy. And, you know, you work with somebody 3 years on a night shift, you get to know him pretty well." So I wrote up a lot of information and included the one photo I had of Toby and folded it up, put it in an envelope, and dropped it off at his office. And I heard from him 2 weeks later. He called me up on a Wednesday and said, "Meet me Friday at the pub. I got some info about your buddy." I'm like, "Cool, great. See you there." So, you know, he was real clear whenever he said he would try to find him for me, that, you know, that this wasn't an official investigation, that this was just a favor to a friend. And he made that very clear.
Did we lose Terry?
I don't know what happened. Well, what we're going to do
I think
is...
Oh, here we go.
Are we back?
Yeah, we're back.
Okay. So I'm sitting down, and he's late, and that's uncharacteristic of him. He was usually always on time. And he comes in late, and I could tell by the look on his face it wasn't good news. And he came over, and he sat down, and I got him a beer, and I said, "So tell me, what's up? You tell me how to find my friend. You got a phone number for me or something?" And he's like, "Terry, I'm afraid your friend is dead." And I'm like, "Dead? What do you mean he's dead? He's a young man. How can he be dead?" And he said, "Terry, look, it was a crossover automobile accident on 94 headed to Detroit. And, you know, you've been around the block once or twice. You know these things happen. And my suggestion to you is that you process it and grieve and move on with your life." And I thought, wow. And you know, I could have so easily have picked up the phone and called someone at Michigan State Police and got a copy of an accident report. And that thought never crossed my mind. In 2017, when I was doing my research for this book, I had the feeling that I wanted to find Toby's grave and maybe visit it.
Right.
And he was alive through September of 2007. He died in 2007. So all those years we could have been, and you know what I think that is? I think the guy was probably doing his job. I know that this sounds kind of out there, but I believe this. I think that somewhere on the federal level, there's a file on Terry and Toby, and it says these two guys should not get their heads together, because two people telling the same story are so much more credible than one. So I guess, I mean, that's an assumption on my part. I don't know that for a fact, but.
Well, we're really sorry for your loss. I can see how that can add to the trauma in regards to your encounter. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I feel fortunate. I mean, I feel bad for him, but I feel fortunate, and maybe there's some survivor guilt in that too. I don't know, but
have you had any contact with his wife since his passing?
My wife had some contact because they were close, and like I said, she stopped by the house and we had dinner, and she's the one that told me about Toby drinking, and his father had passed away, and they had like a family home in Flint, Michigan. And the family agreed to give Toby the house because he had some housing insecurity, and he had employment difficulties too. And I guess, if you drink a half a bottle of vodka before you go to bed every night, you're going to have that.
Yep.
And so the family gave him the house, and he lost it a year and a half later for non-payment of taxes, utilities, and just a long list of things. So
goodness.
And she had no idea what happened to him after that.
Tommy, do you have any comments?
Well, Terry, I got to tell you, this has been a wonderful story. You've just been such a great interview. I got to tell you, it's just very compelling. I think that, first of all, I absolutely believe your experience. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind that you're being absolutely honest with us here. And, you tell it in such detail and everything. And not only the experience itself, though, but actually the experience, how it affected you later on in life and things like that. And I think that's just so interesting, Terry. Thank you for that.
You're welcome. Thank you for the hospitality.
The agony and the angst that we can hear in your voice through your story is very important for other people out there that are experiencing the same thing.
Right.
It's necessary.
Yeah, I want to speak to those people and tell them that from experience that I feel much better having gone through the process of writing this out. And if you can't write, talk to somebody, but getting it out in the open, better. It's much better.
It just takes a lot of courage for you to come out and do all the things that you've done, and really a lot of empathy to be able to work with these other experiencers, people that have had this experience, don't really know how to deal with it. And at least there's some place they can go. There's someone that they can talk to, and that's got to be so important, for the support aspect of this phenomenon.
I might mention just real quick a plug for OPUS, the Organization for Paranormal Understanding and Support. They've been around since 1994. I was on their board for a year. Linda Moulton Howe took my place. It's good people, and they are at opusnetwork.org. They're a nonprofit out of California. And if you're looking for a healthcare provider, like a psychiatrist, therapist, or something to talk to, they can find one in your area that's, I'll say, UFO friendly. They're not dismissive of the topic. They're willing to talk to you with an open mind. They also have an online support forum that's really good.
Yeah, we would definitely like to post their information for sure for our viewers. Absolutely.
Yes, very much so. Terry, I want to thank you for being here this evening. I've really enjoyed your company, and it was very interesting for myself, I'm sure Tommy, and everyone in the chat room, and also online. So thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you, guys. I appreciate it. Thanks, everyone that listens. Listen tonight. Thank you very much for your time.
Okay, before we let you go, though, we're going to show your books again. This is his first book, available on Amazon, Incident at Devil's Den, a true story by Terry Lovelace. Check it out. Pick up a copy.
That's in an audio book too, so you can get that either. There's a cheap Kindle version, the paperback, and I did an audio book for Devil's Den.
Cool.
Outstanding.
And then he has a second book called Devil's Den, The Reckoning. Check that out. Also available on Amazon. And where else did you say, Terry?
At terrylovelace.com.
Yes, check out his site. I've been over there, and it's an excellent site. So check it out. If you need help, check out Opus. We'll put the information down below in the summary after this video posts on YouTube, and you'll be able to go there if you need help.
And anybody that wants to email me, you can hit me up at terrylovelace@yahoo.com.
Cool, Terry, that's great. Thank you very much. And as always, I want to thank everybody in the chat room, everybody online. I want to thank R&D Holographic or Holotech for the $50 super chat. Very nice. We much appreciate it. And everyone, come back and see us on Saturday. We're still going to have our live stream. So we will see you on Saturday evening. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Oops.